When the HOA sent patrol to my secluded lake house, my peaceful retreat was suddenly under siege. How far would I go to stand up against Karen and protect my home? Welcome to our channel. Please subscribe if you want more HOA stories. I never imagined my peaceful lake house would become the center of a storm. From the moment I bought it, I loved waking up to the sound of birds and the gentle waves lapping the shore. My weekends were filled with fishing, kayaking, and enjoying the serene beauty that surrounded me. But lately, things started to change. It began with the neighbors. Mrs. Thompson, next door, was always fussing over her garden. She spent hours trimming her hedges right up to my property line, leaving my flower beds looking messy. At first, I didn't mind. I knew everyone had their own way of keeping their yards. But soon, it wasn't just the hedges. Mrs. Thompson started visiting unannounced, poking around my garden and making snide comments about my landscaping choices. I tried to stay friendly, but her constant criticism wore me down. Then there was Tom from across the lake. He loved his music, but lately he played it so loud that it echoed through the night. I could barely sleep with his heavy bass and loud drums shaking my windows. I asked him kindly to keep the volume down, but he just laughed and said he didn't see the problem. My peaceful nights were turning into restless ones, and I felt my sanctuary slipping away. One sunny morning, I decided to take a walk along the shore to clear my mind. As I admired the sparkling water, I noticed something unusual near the dock. There were signs posted up that I hadn't seen before. HOA Patrol, keep our community beautiful, one sign read. My heart sank. I wasn't part of any homeowners association. I didn't pay any fees or follow any community rules. I wondered who had put up these signs and why they were targeting me. Later that afternoon, just as I was enjoying a quiet cup of coffee on my porch, there was a firm knock on my door. My heart raced as I opened it to find two stern-looking men in matching uniforms. "Good afternoon," one of them began. "We're here from the HOA Patrol. We've received several complaints about your property maintenance." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm not part of your association, so get off my land," I said firmly. They didn't flinch. One of them handed me a list of supposed violations, including things like improper fence height and unruly garden. I glanced at the list, confused and frustrated. I knew my fence was up to code, and my garden was my personal choice. Before I could respond, a third person stepped forward. It was Karen, the HOA president. She was known around the neighborhood as entitled and overbearing, always insisting that things be done her way. Today, she looked even more determined. "We take these matters very seriously," she said with a cold smile. "We expect all properties to meet our standards." I felt a surge of anger but kept my voice steady. "I respect your rules, but I'm not part of your association. My property is my own." Karen's eyes narrowed. "This isn't the last you'll hear from us," she warned, before turning to the patrol officers and leaving. As soon as they were gone, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. What did this mean for me? I loved my lake house too much to let it be taken away by a group I wasn't even part of. Determined to defend my home, I decided to look into the HOA. I spent hours researching property laws and found out that I had every right to own my land without interference, but proving it wasn't going to be easy, especially with Karen's reputation. The next few days were tense. Mrs. Thompson continued her visits, and Tom's music showed no signs of stopping. I started documenting every incident, taking pictures of my garden, and noting the times when the patrol officers showed up. I even drew up a map of my property, lines to ensure there was no overlap with the HOA's supposed boundaries. One evening, as I was reviewing my notes, my phone buzzed with a message from a local news station. They were doing a story on homeowners standing up against unfair HOA practices and wanted to feature my story. My heart leapt. This could be my chance to bring attention to what was happening, and maybe even find others who felt the same way. Excited but nervous, I agreed to the interview. The next morning, I sat down with the reporter, explaining everything from the beginning. I showed them the photos of my garden and the map I had created. The reporter listened intently, asking questions that made me feel heard for the first time in weeks. Just as I thought things might be looking up, Karen found out about the interview. The following night, I heard footsteps on my porch. When I looked out the window, I saw the HOA patrol again, this time with Karen leading the charge. "We need to discuss your participation in the HOA," she declared. My heart pounded. What were they going to do now? Before I could respond, one of the officers pointed to my mailbox. "You need to remove these signs immediately," Karen ordered. I looked at the signs hanging proudly on my property and felt a wave of frustration wash over me. I had documented everything, and I wasn't going to back down without a fight. Determined to protect my home, I stood my ground. "I'm not part of your association, and these signs aren't mine," I replied. Karen's face twisted with anger. "We have ways of enforcing our rules," she snapped before turning to leave with the patrol officers in tow. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the lake, I felt a mix of fear and determination. Karen was not going to let this go easily, and I knew the battle was just beginning. I had to find a way to stand up against her in the HOA. But how far would I go to protect my sanctuary? The thought lingered as I watched the patrol cars disappear into the distance, leaving me alone with my worries. The next morning, I woke up feeling uneasy. The sun peeked through the curtains, but the peace I usually felt was gone. I decided to start my day with a walk around the lake to clear my mind. As I strolled along the shore, I noticed Mrs. Thompson trimming her hedges again. This time, she was cutting them right up to my fence. I approached her calmly. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson. I appreciate your hard work, but could you please leave a little space for my garden?" She looked at me with a tight smile. "I'm just following the HOA rules," she replied curtly before walking away. My frustration bubbled up, but I took a deep breath and reminded myself to stay calm. Later that week, Tom's loud music was a nightly struggle. I tried talking to him, asking if he could lower the volume in the evenings. He shrugged and said, "I'm just having fun. If you don't like it, maybe you should move." His words hurt, but I knew I couldn't give up on my lake house. Determined to find a solution, I decided to research the HOA's rules. I spent hours online, reading through property maps and regulations. I discovered that my lake house was actually outside the official HOA boundaries. Armed with this information, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could prove that I didn't have to follow their rules after all. One evening, as I was reviewing my notes, there was a loud knock at the door. My heart raced as I opened it to find the HOA patrol standing there again. "We need to talk about your property," one of them said sternly. I took a deep breath and showed them the property maps I had printed. "According to these, my land isn't part of the HOA. You can't enforce their rules here." The patrol members exchanged glances but didn't back down. "We have orders to ensure all properties meet the community standards," the other patrol member insisted. I stood my ground, feeling more determined than ever. "I respect the community, but I'm not part of your association. Please leave." They left without another word, but I knew this wasn't the end. That night, I received a call from Karen, the HOA president. Her voice was icy. "We're watching you closely. Don't think you can get away with this." Feeling threatened, I decided to take more action. I visited the local library to learn about property laws and my rights as a landowner. I found articles and books that supported my case, giving me the confidence to fight back legally if needed. Meanwhile, Karen was relentless. She started showing up unannounced, inspecting my property and making snide comments about my supposed non-compliance. At one point, she even placed a notice on my door about a community improvement project she claimed I was ignoring. I knew she was just trying to intimidate me. One Saturday afternoon, I found my mailbox vandalized with threatening messages from the HOA. My heart sank. It was clear Karen was trying to make me feel scared and alone. But instead of giving in, I decided to reach out to my neighbors again. Maybe others were feeling the same way but were too afraid to speak up. I knocked on a few doors, sharing my story and showing them the evidence I had gathered. Slowly, a few of them started to listen. Mr. Ramirez, who lived next door, admitted he was also troubled by Karen's overbearing nature. "She's been making life difficult for everyone," he confessed. Encouraged by this, I organized a small meeting at the Lakehouse. We discussed our experiences and decided to stand together against the HOA's harassment. We agreed to document every incident and support each other through this fight. One evening, as I was compiling our findings, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was Karen herself, accompanied by 2 more patrol members. She wore a fake smile. "We need to see some improvements on your property," she demanded. I pointed out again that my land wasn't part of the HOA, but she laughed dismissively. "Rules are rules," she snapped before storming out. Feeling the pressure mounting, I knew I had to escalate my efforts. I contacted a local journalist, sharing our story and providing all the evidence we had collected. To my surprise, the journalist was interested and agreed to cover our situation. This was the break we needed to bring attention to our plight. The day the article was published, I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. The community started to take notice, and more neighbors came forward with their own stories of Karen's intimidation. The media attention put the HOA under scrutiny, making it harder for Karen to act without facing backlash. However, Karen wasn't ready to give up. She called an emergency HOA meeting, claiming that the media attention was unjust and that our actions were disrupting the community. As I prepared to attend, I felt a surge of determination. This was our chance to make things right once and for all. At the meeting, tensions were high. Karen presented a list of grievances against me, trying to paint me as the villain. But when I shared the article and the testimonies from other neighbors, the room shifted. People started to see Karen's true nature, and her support began to wane. Just as it seemed like things might be turning in our favor, Karen made one final move. She announced that the HOA would be taking legal action against me for trespassing and harassment. Gasps filled the room, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This was the moment that could either break us or push us to fight even harder. As the meeting concluded, I stepped outside to talk with Mr. Ramirez. "We're not backing down," I said firmly. "We have the truth on our side, and we're ready to defend our rights." He nodded. "We're all in this together. Let's make sure Karen can't hurt us anymore." With the legal battle looming, I knew the next steps would be crucial. The fight was far from over, but with the community by my side, I felt more hopeful than ever. Little did I know, the biggest challenge was still ahead, and the outcome would change everything. From the moment I saw my favorite chair taken by the HOA patrol, I knew I couldn't let this go any longer. I felt a mix of anger and determination. I had to protect my lake house and stand up against Karen and the HOA. But how? First, I decided to stay calm and think. I spent hours at the local library reading about property rights and HOA laws. I found out that not everyone in the neighborhood had to follow the HOA rules if they weren't members. This was my chance to fight back with facts. Next, I gathered all the documents I could find about my property. I looked at old maps, property lines, and any paperwork that showed I owned my land. I even talked to a lawyer who agreed to help me for free, because what Karen was doing was unfair. With all this information, I felt more confident, but I couldn't do this alone. I needed support from my neighbors. I went door to door, talking to people and sharing my story. Some were scared of Karen, but a few brave ones decided to join me. We formed a small group, each with our own reasons for standing up to the HOA. Together, we were stronger. One evening, Karen called a special HOA meeting. I knew this was my chance to make a big stand. I prepared my notes, maps, and evidence, ready to show everyone the truth. As I walked into the meeting room, I felt my heart race, but I stayed calm. Karen was there, looking confident and ready to dismiss my concerns. The meeting started, and Karen began to talk about maintaining the community standards. When it was my turn, I stood up and began to speak clearly. I showed the maps that proved my property lines were correct. I presented the laws that said I didn't have to follow HOA rules if I wasn't a member. I shared stories from my neighbors who were also unhappy with Karen's strict rules. Karen tried to interrupt me, but I stayed focused. I wasn't angry. I was determined to be heard. The room was silent as I spoke, and slowly, I saw some neighbors nodding in agreement. I could tell that my words were making a difference. Just when I thought things were going well, Karen pulled out a document she said proved I was violating HOA rules. My heart sank, but I stayed composed. I calmly explained that the document was outdated and didn't apply to my current situation. The lawyer I had spoken to earlier confirmed this, adding more weight to my argument. The tension in the room was thick. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. I could feel the eyes of the neighbors on me, some showing support, others still unsure. Karen, realizing she was losing control, tried one last time to shut me down. But the room was no longer silent. People began to speak up, sharing their own frustrations with the HOA. Seeing that her authority was crumbling, Karen stood up angrily. "This is not over," she snapped, before storming out of the room. The meeting ended with a sense of hope. The HOA board decided to look into my claims and promised to review the rules to ensure they were fair for everyone. But I wasn't done yet. I knew that changing the rules wouldn't happen overnight. I needed to keep the momentum going. I reached out to local news stations, sharing my story about how the HOA was overstepping and how Karen was making life difficult for honest homeowners. The media picked up my story, and soon, more people in the community were aware of what was happening. With the media attention, more neighbors came forward to support our cause. We organized a community rally at my lake house, inviting everyone to join us and show that we stood united against the unfair HOA rules. On the day of the rally, the lake house was filled with people holding signs that read, "Protect our homes," and "Fair HOA rules now." Karen tried to come to the rally, hoping to intimidate us, but the sight of so many supportive neighbors made her back down. The local news was there, capturing every moment. I spoke passionately about the importance of standing up for what's right and not letting one person control our lives. The overwhelming support from the community and the media made it impossible for the HOA board to ignore our demands. They had no choice but to take action. A new board was elected, one that listened to the residents and promised to make fair decisions. Karen was removed from her position, and with her gone, the HOA began to change for the better. In the weeks that followed, peace returned to my lake house. The neighbors who had once been silent now felt empowered to speak up and protect their own homes. We worked together to create new, fair rules that respected everyone's property and rights. The sense of community grew stronger, and the lake house became a true sanctuary once again. Looking back, I realized that standing up against Karen and the HOA was the right thing to do. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I felt scared and alone, but my calmness and determination made all the difference. I learned that even when faced with a powerful antagonist, staying reasonable and gathering support can lead to real change. The experience taught me the importance of knowing my rights and the value of community. Together, we had turned a conflict into an opportunity to build a stronger, more respectful neighborhood. My lake house was no longer just my peaceful retreat. It was a symbol of our collective strength and unity. As I sit by the lake now, watching the sunset, I feel a deep sense of accomplishment. The struggles we faced brought us closer, and the lake house remains a place where we can all enjoy peace and harmony. I hope our story inspires others to stand up for themselves and their communities. No matter how tough the fight may seem, the peace at my lake house felt fragile, like a calm lake before a storm. Just when I thought everything was settled, new problems started to pop up. The new HOA leaders were different, but some old habits were hard to break. I wondered if our hard-won peace would last. One sunny morning, I found a notice on my door about new rules for the lake area. They wanted to restrict where boats could be launched and set strict guidelines for shoreline decorations. I felt a knot in my stomach. Was this another way to control us? I knew I had to act before these rules took away the beauty of our lake. I decided to take a closer look at the property maps and the new regulations. Late nights were spent reading through legal documents and comparing them with the old maps. I discovered that some of the new rules didn't match the actual property lines. My heart raced. This was my chance to stand up again. Determined, I reached out to a local lawyer who specialized in property rights. Together, we reviewed the documents and found several inconsistencies. With solid evidence in hand, I felt more confident. But I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. I needed the community to join me. I organized a meeting at the lake house, inviting all my neighbors to discuss the new rules. At first, many were hesitant, remembering how Karen had taken over before. But as I shared my findings and explained how these rules could harm our beloved lake, people started to listen. Slowly, voices of agreement filled the room. We were united once more. To make our case stronger, I decided to use the media. I contacted a local news station and shared our story about the unfair HOA rules. The reporter was interested and agreed to do a feature on our fight to protect the lake. When the news aired, support poured in from nearby communities. People were inspired by our determination to keep our lake beautiful and free from overbearing control. As the pressure from the media grew, the new HOA leaders realized they couldn't ignore us. They agreed to revisit the proposed rules and work with us to create fair guidelines. It was a small victory, but it showed that our voices mattered. We continued to meet regularly, ensuring that everyone had a say in how our community was managed. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, I stood on the dock and looked around at my neighbors. We had built something special together, a community, based on respect and cooperation. The challenges we faced had brought us closer, teaching us the importance of standing up for what we believe in. Just then, a familiar face approached me. It was Karen, looking different without her usual stern expression. I was wrong, she admitted quietly. I saw how strong you all are and realized I needed to change. Her apology was sincere, and I could see the relief in her eyes. We shook hands, both knowing that true harmony required understanding and forgiveness. As the night grew darker, lanterns lit up the lake, reflecting our shared commitment to a better future. I felt a deep sense of accomplishment and hope. We had turned a place of conflict into a sanctuary of unity. Looking out over the water, I knew that no matter what challenges came our way, we could overcome them together. Our story didn't end with one victory. It was just the beginning of a lasting partnership, where every voice was heard and every person mattered. The lake house remained my peaceful retreat, not just because of its beauty, but because of the strong, caring community that surrounded it. We had created a legacy of respect and resilience, ensuring that our lake would remain a place of joy for generations to come.